This is the Earth Science Classroom. Welcome back to the channel. This video is on mechanical weathering. We're going to look at this term, and you can use either mechanical or physical weathering. Both terms are applicable. And we're going to look at what it actually is, the definition of mechanical weathering or physical weathering, and the effect it has on the environment, on the landscape, the terrain, how it shapes the relief and the landscape in general, and looking at different types of mechanical weathering and explain these types in more detail, giving like a little overview, and then looking at some examples of each type of mechanical weathering, and it will lead you on to other videos that just look at each type in more detail. So first, how do we get to weathering? Well, obviously everything is derived from the sun. Okay, as we can see from this picture right here, which I put right at the front. So everything comes from the sun and radiation, and that drives our climate. It drives the atmospheric processes. It drives the initiation of the water cycle through evaporation, through different states of matter for water. It then obviously looks at, the weather as a knock-on effect, and this basically creates, based on other factors like elevation and proximity to the oceans and continentality, this basically creates the elements and the consistent process or action of elements working on the rocks that are on the surface of the earth is how we get weathering. Weathering in general is the breaking down of rock into smaller pieces, which is fragments, okay, and eventually going to turn into what we call sediments, which have different sizes but are the smaller version of the initial origin parent rock that has been weathered by the elements over a set time period, which usually is a long time, depending on the location and the exposure to the elements and the intensity of the elements. But the breaking down of rock is essentially what we're going to do now. Now, the mechanical part, as opposed to the chemical. Now, the chemical is using chemistry and elements and acids to break down and change the composition of the rock. Mechanical is you have one big rock, you add weathering, and over time, okay, then what you get equals is little small rocks, the broken down of rocks. However, it is the same material. So this here is the same as this, but with a lot smaller pieces and a lot larger surface area. And the more surface area, which is SA, then you have increased weathering and also increased erosion based on how small they are and how easily they can be picked up by wind and water and ice and other things like that. So the key is the mechanical weathering is going to break down and change the dimensions of the rock over time into smaller pieces, but it's the same material, whereas chemical weathering is changing the chemistry or composition of that material. So the main types of mechanical or physical weathering are listed here. So there's 5 main ones. Now, some textbooks, some articles may state other amounts or quantities of weathering types, but I just basically generalize into 5. So the first one is abrasion. All right, so we'll get onto that in a second. That's kind of a big one in terms of contact. Next one is thermal or heat expansion. Frost weathering. So again, looking at heat or in terms of thermal or lack of heat energy to create frost. Exfoliation, the removal of pieces, and organic weathering, so in terms of plants and animals. So abrasion. Now again, I mentioned this earlier, I'll be doing videos on each type of these weathering situations or case studies or types. And abrasion is going to be just taking rocks. Okay, so it's the breaking down of rocks by other rocks. Basically, it's the impact or the collision or the process of wearing down rock. And this impact, this collision, this knocking of, constantly knocking rocks against rocks, and the, depends on the mass and the velocity, and the energy would basically control the amount of material that is being broken down and reduced to a smaller size, but obviously larger surface area. And then when you change the size of the material being knocked against the other materials or rocks, then you're going to change the quantity or the level of the mechanical weathering. Now, the methods or the ways in which these rocks can be carried, obviously smaller ones by wind, and the Aeolian landscapes and terrains being created by the wind carrying bits of rocks and dust and smashing them against other rocks, causing features. You have ice, namely glaciers, all right, carrying rocks through down the frozen river, depending on the temperature. You have water. Now, water's a big one because you've got terrestrial surface water, fluvial systems and streams and groundwater, and you also have salt water in the oceans and currents and tides and coastline wave action, hydraulic action, taking different sizes of rocks and then obviously moving them, smashing them against the other rocks. And a cliff example is a perfect example or image to look at when discussing abrasion, or even a large rock down a turbulent, rapid river high in the mountains. And you've got this beautiful waterfall right here, this beautiful glacier right here, and the ability to basically take rock and smash it against each other. And over here in this little beach picture, you've got the larger rock right there, and eventually the sediment or sand that is created from consistent weathering would be this size. So taking a very large rock, breaking it down into sand, basically. So thermal expansion is basically the addition of thermal energy from the sun, and obviously this is during daylight hours, and looking at heat. Okay, and you're going to add thermal energy, and you're going to basically increase kinetic energy in the molecules, and basically make any material, including the rocks, expand and increase in volume when it's hot. Now, obviously, when the opposite, when it's cold, right? When it's cold, you have a lack of thermal energy. You're going to have the material actually contract. And this process of expansion and contraction can eventually wear down and break the rocks into smaller pieces. Frost weathering is, again, to do with a lack of thermal energy, creating cold air temps to thus create frost, and the condensation and crystallization into water droplets or water crystals. Now this happens in various cracks or joints in the rock, and can occur in three main ways. You got frost wedging, you have freeze-thaw, and the third one you have, put it right here, third one you have is shattering. So the three main ways that frost can break down a rock is wedging, freeze-thaw, and shattering. Exfoliation is another type, and this is to do with pressure release or what we call unloading, which is also to do with thermal expansion. Now, this basically is where you have a rock, and there was originally a surface layer, rocks, bedrock, and soil. And then what happened was, over time and through maybe tectonic processes, this, let's say, granite rock that was beneath the Earth's surface, maybe it was some sort of like batholith or laccolith, okay? The surface is now here with the uplifted granite. Again, once it's uplifted, it's now exposed to the elements, and exfoliation, this type of mechanical physical weathering, can occur on this piece of granite rock, and you can actually take off slices of rock layers called sheeting on the top part of the rock. And as it happens again, you'll have some sort of rebound, like an isostatic rebound, where the rock would actually move up again, thus creating more and more exfoliation opportunities and creating a nice positive feedback loop. So last one is organic processes. Now this would be either trees, vegetation, even grasses, okay, various levels of vegetation and ecosystems whereby you have the influence of the underground section of these vegetation types, whereby the roots would move or grow through the soil, bedrock, and start to break it down and change it based on the size of root systems. Or you can have animals, where they would create their habitats, they would burrow through the ground. Various species of animal do this, and also you can add in humans into this, obviously, as we are animals, and we obviously impact, drill, dig, mine, acquire natural resources from the ground in large quantities, and we have a very large impact on the subsurface terrain of the earth, and obviously therefore we would increase the rate of weathering and erosion and degradation. We are very good at that. Alright, so that's the 5 main types of weathering, mechanically or physically, how we change the rock and break it down to smaller pieces through various types. Alright, thanks for watching, and if you liked the video, please leave a comment, like the channel, and hope to see you soon in the next video.